Alright, today I'm reviewing my own Fender American Ultra Luxe Stratocaster guitar. I have modified this guitar. As you can see, the bridge is blocked and I've removed one of the volume potentiometers and the tone is now a master tone. I'm a huge fan of Ibanez, but today I'm reviewing my favorite Fender guitar. So this won't be a typical review from a Fender fan. I'll be discussing the quality, the playability, how it sounds, and I'll give my overall thoughts. And at the end of the video, there's going to be a full mix demo song. And by the way, this video isn't sponsored by Fender or Ibanez or any of the brands shown. Let's talk about the quality of this guitar. I do have to say overall I like this guitar, but in discussing this section I realized there are a lot of misses. So this might come off as pretty negative, and it is important to tell you guys about these things. So let's jump right in. This guitar feels fairly well put together. Nothing has fallen apart and there haven't been any issues directly with the functionality. But there are some things, so I'm going to talk about the good and the bad. First of all, one of the bridge saddle height adjustment screws is messed up. Using the correct Allen key, it works with all the other saddle screws, but this one right here, they must have messed it up in the factory when they were doing the final setup. They pretty much pulverized it. It is very difficult to get an Allen key in there, so not off to a great start. When I get a guitar, I'll let it acclimate to the climate around here, and then I'll do my initial setup. I'll change the strings, I'll set the neck, relief the action, all that. So finding one of the saddle height adjustment screws was almost unusable from the get-go. That was kind of disappointing. The tuning stability on this guitar could be better too. The Tusk nut on here is fine, and the locking tuners are good too. They do what you think they would do. They hold the string in the post. But the B string especially, but the B and the E string, not so much the G string, but it does go out of tune. They just don't want to stay in tune. It's not super unplayable. It doesn't happen every 2 minutes, but it does happen every 10. And if the weather's been particularly crazy, if the humidity is going all over the place, down during the day, up during the night, things like that, it does happen every 5. So the string trees could be a factor, maybe the neck. The strap buttons have held in place just fine. The neck itself hasn't come unscrewed. There haven't been any issues with the output jack. I know the wiring has been modified, so I can't technically comment on the original wiring, but things like the selector switch tip, that hasn't come out. The tuners haven't fallen out. So the quality in general is pretty good. But as a whole, this guitar doesn't hold its setup as well as similarly priced other guitars. Like my Ibanez, for example. Being an Ibanez fan, I do have a bunch of them. And this is an issue because while I do know how to set up my guitars reasonably okay, there are times where I need to pick up a guitar for a certain sound. Like this one for a near single coil sound. These are stacked single coils. They're not true singles, but they do get the job done. More about sound later. But when I pick up this guitar and I need to get this particular tone, and I've set it up a month ago, and the neck is already bowing too much, or the neck is too straight. Sometimes I just don't have a spare 20 minutes to go ahead, do the setup, make some adjustments, re-intonate it. And maybe you might not either. Maybe you have a day job, maybe you have kids, pets, other responsibilities, errands you need to run. We don't always have an extra 20 minutes, extra hour to stop what we're doing, fiddle around with our tools. Sometimes we really do only have half an hour to get that part recorded or to practice that part for an upcoming show. It is important to make time to do routine maintenance, and I do make time for that. I do change strings, condition fretboards, set action as the seasons change. But it has been a little disappointing for an instrument this expensive to need this much attention, especially since it's not my number one. Let's move on to the frets. The frets are stainless steel. This guitar does have 22 frets, of course. And so there's two things to talk about here. First, the number of frets, and then I guess the quality of them. But when it comes to 22 versus 24 frets, the case for 24 frets, you get a nice full range. You get those 2 octaves. I do have a few songs that use the 24th fret, and while it is possible to bend up to the 24th fret, for things like scale runs, for tapping, that's not always feasible. Another nice feature of having 24 frets is having easier access to the 22nd fret. If a guitar is built for having 24 frets and having them easily usable, then the 22nd fret is especially easy to get to. Now that being said, the case for 22 frets is that you get your neck pickup over that octave harmonic, and many prefer the tone of how that sounds. You could say that's part of the signature sound of a Stratocaster, and so in that sense having 22 frets doesn't disappoint. But that's also because there are other options available to me and available to you if you need those 24 frets. But now the quality is something I want to talk about. While these stainless steel frets, they are nice and durable, They don't feel like they're cheap steel, but what they did is whatever coating they spray on this neck to get it this particular shade of amber yellow, they just went ahead and sprayed it on top of the frets. They covered the whole neck. So while this doesn't really affect playability, the frets do still feel pretty solid. The coating doesn't really catch. The coating is chipping off too where I've played them the most, which is kind of funny. I know a lot of guitar players like the playing wear on the maple necks, but who's talking about wanting to chip off coating from stainless steel frets? It almost feels like an insult on an instrument this expensive. You wouldn't buy a car where they painted it and left the windows open and got paint on the seats. And then they tell you, oh, the paint will wear off as you put sitting wear on the seats. This isn't quite as dramatic as that, but you can kind of see where I'm coming from. One of the plus sides of these frets, though, is while they're stainless steel, they're not giant, tall frets like you would find on a Super Strat with stainless steel frets. So if you're looking for that Stratocaster feel while playing and you're worried these might be too modern feeling, it's not too bad. You will feel the difference if you're doing vibrato or bends. You will feel it's a bit smoother, but I don't think it's a deal breaker. Moving on, talking about the body on this guitar is made of ash, and I have to say the body isn't light at all. It's actually somewhat heavy. With that weight, there's no neck dive or anything. If you're worried about there being neck dive from having the locking tuners, that isn't a thing on this guitar. I'm finding that with guitars with locking tuners, if the design itself tends to be neck heavy, then it doesn't matter if it has the locking tuners on it or not. And while we're on the topic of the locking tuners, they work perfectly fine. They hold the string in place. There's no string slipping. When you've changed the string, you're tightening it up. It's nice to know that there's one less point where the strings can slip or bind. It's nice peace of mind. Now let's move on to playability, and this is going to be a much more positive section. I'm happy to say the neck on this guitar is comfortable. I usually prefer Ibanez necks, the necks on the Prestiges, on the Premiums, but this augmented D shape, as they call it on the website, does feel pretty nice. It's not a substitute for Ibanez necks in my hands, but I do like it than all the other Stratocaster necks I've tried. Alright, more on the neck. The rolled fretboard edges do feel pretty nice. They did a pretty good job with these. I notice even though it has that augmented D-shape profile it claims, it is pretty good for thumb around the neck stuff still. Still plays like a Stratocaster. So of course you can play thumb behind the neck style. I find when I'm first picking up this guitar, I do kind of just have it fill up my hand, and then I go back to my regular thumb behind the neck form, or mostly thumb behind the neck. This guitar has a compound radius of 10 inches to 14 inches, and that is a cool feature. I do prefer uniform fretboard radii, so if it was up to me, I would rather have just a straight 14-inch fretboard radius through the whole neck. It does take me a bit of getting used to be able to play down here where the fretboard radius is 10 inches. I typically prefer 12 inches or flatter, and of course, as I've mentioned, I do prefer the Ibanez necks, and those are pretty flat. But it's not unplayable, and if you love compound fretboard radii, this will suit your hands pretty well. And probably my favorite thing in terms of playability on this guitar is the tapered neck heel. Not because it is tapered, but because it has this rounded section right here, so your hand fits really, really nicely into it. It makes it so easy to get up to that 22nd fret. Makes it super nice to play up here. And while I know people have been playing the standard heel on Stratocasters for decades, if you dislike that square shape of that heel, then over time, over the hours, over the years of playing the guitar, practicing, that can lead to resentment. Whereas this, you barely notice the neck heel at all. There might be some purists out there who will say the square neck heel does improve the tone or anything. That may or may not be true. But even if it is true, if that makes the guitar sound 2% better, I'd rather play the guitar that I enjoy playing. And to me, it's not going to matter in any of my mixes or anything. Now moving on, talking about the bridge, separate from the height adjustment screw, the bridge itself feels pretty nice against the palm. I prefer the feel of, say, like a Floyd system, a hip shot bridge, an Ibanez Low Pro, but it hardly takes any adjustment time when I'm playing this guitar to get used to the bridge. I'm talking less than a minute. Of course, you can't talk about a Stratocaster and playability without talking about the middle pickup and the controls. I have lowered the middle pickup a little bit. I have tried to keep it as high as possible so that I can get a nice strong sounding position 4 sound, position 2 sound. But on pretty much all my guitars, I do lower the middle pickup. In theory, you can improve your technique to be so perfect you can play over the middle, But in practice, we have things like adrenaline. We tend to pick harder for some things. Doesn't help that the magnets stick up over some of the strings on these pickups. And I see a lot of Strat players playing between the middle and the neck pickup. So I have lowered it, and that improves things a lot. It barely changes the tone or the volume of those positions. I never use the middle position on its own, the middle pickup. And then I have changed the wiring. It's master volume, master tone. I've gotten rid of this volume right here, as you can see. And it's improved things so much. For some people, it's feasible to put your fingers around the volume and hopefully never accidentally turn it down. But for me, when I'm playing it, it always gets in the way. I do not need 2 volume potentiometers. This is a night and day difference for me, and I straight up would not get this guitar if it was impossible to do this. One more note on playability, the forearm contour. On my Ibanez RGs, it's more at a 45-degree angle from the line of the neck, but here it's more towards the back. So when I'm playing like seated down classic position like this, it feels pretty good. But when I'm playing standing up, it does push against here. My forearm does hit against here. I do have it at a nice height that I like playing my guitars at. I don't play my guitars the highest up in the world, but I don't play it too low. So while the guitar is usable, I wish the angle of this forearm contour was a bit more up here. All right, now let's talk about the sound. Maybe the primary reason why you'd get a guitar like this. Definitely the reason why I got this guitar. And I do have to say, yes, these aren't true single coils. They're the stacked noiseless ones. And they do sound slightly different than true single coils. But the trade-off is you don't get any of the hum, the buzz. And that's critically important for me. There's so much EM noise in this area. Using true single coils would be impossible. All my tracks would be full of buzz. Maybe you prefer the sound of the buzz. Maybe there's some people out there like that. But I can't stand it. I don't want it in my music. So these sound great and they suit my needs well. Because they sound more like single coils and I'm more used to humbuckers, I do use the tone potentiometer on this guitar quite a bit. Whenever I use more heavily distorted tones, I'm turning the tone all the way down to 6. And that gets me a more fuller sound that I like. This guitar does have the push button on the volume, and it changes the voicings or pickup combinations. I did preserve that feature when changing the wiring, but honestly, I never use it. Not once. I pushed it to try it the first time I got this guitar. It was interesting, but I don't need it. I got this guitar for the typical Strat sounds with the 5-way switch, the 3 single coil pickups. Pushing that button doesn't do anything for me, honestly. It is a cool feature, and in theory, having all the options is helpful, but there's also a creative boost I find I get when I limit myself more. For example, with the 5-way switch, you can get the neck pickup, the bridge pickup, position 4 with these 2 pickups. In theory, you could use all the combinations in every song. But at the end of the day, if you just want to use the neck tone and then the neck and middle tone in your song, do you have to force yourself then to use just the middle, just the bridge, the neck and the middle? The song doesn't always need every combination of tones. And so then through extension of that, if I'm already getting the tones I need, I don't need to push that button. So here's a demonstration on how everything sounds with a clean tone, a lead tone, and a distorted rhythm tone. I do tend to play with either heavy distortion or clean. So here's what that sounds like. Now, some overall thoughts. First, I have to say this has been a very difficult review to write. The Stratocaster is a legendary guitar that has helped many artists make incredible songs through many decades. So how could I review this guitar and criticize design choices when it has already seen so much success in so many talented players' hands? In a way, doing that feels like I'm criticizing the history of music itself. But at the end of the day, everyone's hands are different, everyone's playing styles are different, everyone's preferences are different. Everyone's tastes are different. I can only talk about this guitar and how it's treated me, how it's been, how it's held up, the hits and misses of it. I can only share my own experience. And I hope this has been helpful for you. I have to recognize that this guitar is a bit out of my comfort zone. It has the 3 single coils. I know they're not true single coils, as I've said. I'm used to more 2 humbuckers or HSH. While this guitar isn't my number one, it does fill a niche and it fills it pretty well. What else would I change about this guitar? I've already done modifications to the control setup, as you've seen. I've already blocked the bridge, which by the way is completely reversible. I just take the wood blocks out and it's a fully functioning tremolo. The bridge pickup does sound good for my uses for a single coil-ish sound. I do have to say the times I need that sound though are few and far between. I do have a few songs where I am playing leads on that bridge single coil, but that's less than 1% of all the music I play. If I was going to change this guitar to be one of my top players, I would have a humbucker in the bridge. For the times I would need that single coil sound, I'd be perfectly fine using a split humbucker or even compromising and using position 2, the middle and the bridge. But having said all this, there isn't a need for me to change this guitar's identity that much to put a bridge humbucker in. The bridge single does have its own niche in the tones I use. And I do have a bunch of other options, as you can see, for bridge humbuckers. And it's the collection of features, the identity, I guess, of the Stratocaster that makes me continue to keep it. What are some things I overall like about this guitar? Well, the neck profile is pretty comfortable. The neck pickup tone is fantastic. The locking tuners are always appreciated. But overall, the thing I like the most about this guitar is it helps me get the Stratocaster tones when I need them. Is having 22 frets okay for my uses? To me, the lack of 24 frets does matter. I do find myself going up there more than I think I would. And I do miss it when I don't have it. It is kind of a shock too, where your main players are 24 fret guitars. You switch to a 22 fret guitar, you look down, you're a little bit disoriented. Something about it, even if I'm not looking up at those top frets, it still seems different. It doesn't quite feel like home. And to me, the trade-off of playability and losing having the pickup over that octave harmonic, it's worth it for me. Now, is this guitar worth it? The stainless steel frets are nice. The curve here on the neck heel is very nice, but given how much you might want to modify the guitar, you might be better off getting a less expensive Stratocaster or a Strat copy and doing all your modifications there. Even if you change all the electronics, the pickups, all that, if the guitar is $1,000 less or something, you'll still be saving a lot of money. Would I buy this guitar again if something happened to it? Well, I'm glad I have it. I do like how it sounds. It is relatively fun to play, despite all the shortcomings I've highlighted. But if something happened to it now, maybe I wouldn't replace it. I do have a bunch of options that sound almost as good. There aren't too many situations where I need this, and I do have more stable, comfortable guitars for me. I don't dislike this guitar enough to sell it just yet, but that's where my thoughts are. But what do you guys think? Is the American Ultra Luxe Stratocaster an epic guitar that suits all your needs? Would you prefer a Super Strat with humbuckers? Be sure to comment down below your thoughts. Of course, this is YouTube, so I have to say the YouTube things. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, share the video, print out every frame and mail it, join the Discord, check the socials. If you're looking for something cool to listen to, I've got my music on all major streaming services. I do original songs and some video game music covers. And as always, peace.